50 also did an interview while out in the UK with Apple Music, the Rebecca Jude Show on Apple Music. And he said something very interesting, which I think he said this before. I could be wrong. I know he's mentioned what Dr. Dre's least favorite track on Get Rich or Die Tryin' is, but in this interview, he mentioned what his least favorite track on Get Rich or Die Tryin' is. And I don't know if he's talking about back then or now, but let's go over the article. 50 Cent's track record speaks for itself, and his acumen is only bolstered by how he is his own biggest critic, despite the widespread admiration for his work. Last week, Fifth performed at London's O2 Arena as part of the international leg of his Final Lap tour, which is the 20-year celebration of his debut LP, Get Rich or Die Tryin'. During the stop, the hip-hop icon set aside some time for an interview with the Rebecca Jude Show that is now available on Apple Music. During the chat, he discussed his culture-shifting breakthrough album and even singled out one track from it that he isn't particularly thrilled about in hindsight. He said this: "Many Men was my least favorite at that point because musically we was in the boom bap phase. We was in that hard-hitting intensity, the energy on the records, and it's the slowest song on Get Rich or Die Tryin', and it's now the tempo that the artists are rapping to. So the fast-tempo, hard-hitting beats, that was that era, that time period, and the whole album had it." Elsewhere in the interview, he reflected on the past 2 decades and how far he's come. He said, "If you asked me, to make a wish in 2003, I would have just wished that my music was a hit." Yeah, he said that millions of times. But I think he's talking about back then. It's his least favorite now. I think if you ask him like currently, because he's saying back then music was a lot more high tempo, up pace, but Many Men was a slow, and now it's like it's changed to that versus, which is that's the beautiful thing that makes Get Rich or Die Tryin' a classic. Not only does it have different tempos and different flavors of music, but it has different areas in hip hop, from the South to the East to the West. It has every flavor, and then on top of that, it has like every topic as well. You got club records, you got personal records, you got club records, personal records, you got gangster records, you got whatever type of records. You have everything in that album. That's why I'm saying it's 50 was smart in how he selected everything. Six Figure Digga, the producer of Many Men, who I have in my Get Rich or Die Tryin' documentary. If you've not seen my Get Rich or Die Tryin' documentary, go ahead and check it out. How 50 Cent got rich and nearly died trying on YouTube. Check it out. I interviewed Six Figure as well. And I invited him on the podcast. So, I haven't invited him yet, but I want to invite him on the podcast. I would love to have him here to talk. He also dropped a new album. We're going to talk about that just a little bit because I missed the timing on reviewing that as well. Even though I haven't listened to the full thing, I want to talk about it a little bit because he does deserve props for that. It's a great album. He did an interview with TMZ, and he said this: "In my humble opinion, that was the point. If you got a track like that along with other tracks that Dr. Dre did, then it's not going to sound the same because I'm not Dr. Dre. Also, when it was done, it was a different frame of mind, a different way of thinking. So when you're trying to blend those two things together, I can see that." The producer then said Bloodhound was his least favorite track. He said, "That's the worst song on the album. I would probably say that Bloodhound song. To me, that's the song that when you listen to it sonically, that's the one that sticks out. At that time, the Southern influence was still taking over. I mean, he signed Young Buck because of his influence coming from, the era of Juvenile and all that type of sound. 50 was the one that was bringing the New York sound back. But with that Bloodhound song, I felt like that was kind of catering to that audience that was happening at that time." And I agree with him. I think besides I don't think Bloodhound's the worst track on Get Rich or Die Tryin'. Honestly, there really isn't a bad track on Get Rich or Die Tryin', but if I had to do like my least one that I listen to, maybe Gotta Make It to Heaven, because the hook is kind of just like repetitive. Gotta make it to heaven. I'm going through hell. I gotta make it to heaven. I gotta make it to heaven. But the verse on that is crazy. It's not like I'm not saying it's a bad song. A whole album's a classic. I love every song. I can listen to the whole album top to bottom, no skips. But I've had to like select, okay, what is my least favorite of everything? I think it's Gotta Make It to Heaven. Potentially, yeah. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, very cool. Six Figure released his own album. A lot of features. It's got Lloyd Banks on it, Vado, Fabulous, lots of people, man. It's called Person of Interest. And it's a great project, man. I think people should definitely check it out, man. I think he's underrated when it comes to what he does as a producer. And he's just overall a great person, man. I think he drops great music, man. He has a different style and taste that is slept on, man. It's very slept on. So let me play. So you got 17 tracks on this album. Features from Raekwon, Vado, Dragon, Fresco Kane, Sky Zoo, Camp Low, Ron Browse, Neek Rusher, Legendary Baller, Vado Lloyd Banks, Big L, Stan Spit, lots of people. 17 tracks. I listened to about half the album so far. I think to like 13th track. I've listened to the Banks and Vado. Obviously, that's probably one of my favorites. I did say Fabulous. I thought Fabulous was on here. I might be tripping. Great album, though, man. If you guys haven't checked it out, check it out. Person of Interest, Six Figure Digger. Check it out, man. I think you guys, if you're a fan of hip-hop, this is a great album that, people should listen to. So shout out to him. I definitely want to invite him on the podcast, talk about this album, talk about just his career overall, because he did a great interview on the Get Rich documentary as well. And we talked about a lot of things that I didn't add in the documentary because it was like outside of Get Rich. So very cool, man. And I agree with him, man. I think 50's tripping I think he's changed his mind now. It sounds like back then, because Dr. Dre's least favorite is 21 Questions. And it was a lot slower record, too. So, yeah, I mean, everybody has their favorites, least favorites. So,